It was just another hectic afternoon in the city, until a homeless girl interrupted a businessman in the middle of the chaos. "Sir, look under the car." The man was shocked, thinking it might be a trap or something dangerous. Cautiously, he bent down to check. But what he found was nothing like he expected, and made him see life in a way he never had before. And from that innocent gesture, a connection so deep is born that no fortune could ever buy. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Now on with the story. It was late afternoon in New York City, and the typical chaos of a mall parking garage was swallowing everything in sight. Impatient horns cut through the hot Tuesday air, hurried footsteps echoed between concrete pillars. Shopping bags swung from the arms of tired shoppers. Irritated drivers fought over parking spots as if their very survival depended on it, and hundreds of people stared more at the glowing screens of their phones than at the real world happening right in front of them. Between gleaming luxury cars and ordinary, dust-covered vehicles, a man in an impeccable suit strode through the rows with long, determined steps, like someone moving through life without a glance to either side. Too fast, too cold, too automatic. His mind completely trapped by ever-growing numbers, ever-tightening deadlines, and meetings that always seemed more important than anything remotely human. Daniel was 43 years old, and the owner of a tech company valued at many millions of dollars. He had built that empire himself, brick by brick, line of code by line of code, sacrifice by sacrifice. He had a routine that simply didn't fit into a normal day, possessions that impressed anyone who crossed his path, and a schedule so absurdly packed that even taking a calm breath seemed like a task that needed to be scheduled with a specific time and a stopwatch. On that particular Tuesday afternoon, he was late for a crucial meeting with foreign investors who had come from far away to see his company's most ambitious project. The meeting was set to start in exactly 17 minutes. His phone buzzed non-stop in his jacket pocket. More demands, more pressure, another race against a clock that never stopped. Daniel was just touching the silver handle of his executive sedan when he heard something completely unlikely in that landscape of metal, haste, and indifference. It was the sound of bare feet running after him, slapping against the hot asphalt with an urgency that cut through the garage noise like a knife. He turned instinctively, already annoyed before he even saw who it was, expecting some persistent panhandler or someone trying to sell something he would never buy. But what his eyes met made him freeze for a full second, maybe two, more time than he'd care to admit. It was a small girl, too thin for her apparent age, wearing worn, dirty clothes, her dark hair haphazardly tied back with an old rubber band, breathing heavily as if she had just escaped a very real and very close danger. She was pointing under his car with a small, visibly trembling hand, and there was such a genuine urgency in her wide brown eyes that Daniel felt his heart pound in his chest without understanding why. The girl managed to speak between gasps of air. "Sir, please, look under the car." The sentence hit him like a warning of imminent catastrophe. In fractions of a second, that felt like an eternity, Daniel's trained mind automatically raced through the worst-case scenarios. Traps, security risks, threats, kidnappings, everything his life, so full of money, protection, and obsessive control, had taught him to suspect in every shadow and every unexpected gesture. The paranoia that comes with financial success began to whisper in his ear. But still, something in the child's authentic desperation, something in her voice that carried no malice, only genuine fear, made Daniel slowly bend down, half reluctant, half curious. The garage remained noisy around them, but to him the sound became strangely distant, muffled, as if the world had decided to pause just for that moment. He crouched and looked under the car's shiny black body. Under the front driver's side wheel was a simple brown paper bag, slightly crumpled from time and handling, still warm to the touch, exuding a distinct smell of fried food that was both familiar and distant. Daniel carefully picked up the bag, still completely clueless about what was happening, and slowly opened it, almost afraid of what he might find inside. What he saw was a small, golden-brown savory turnover, perfectly intact, like a precious treasure deliberately hidden from the world's greed. Daniel slowly raised his eyes, confusion written all over his face, and looked at the girl who was still standing there, now a little further back, her small, dirty hands nervously clasped in front of her frail body, staring intently at the paper bag as if she were watching her own heart being laid bare for a stranger to judge. And then she began to explain, in a low, trembling voice that carried a mixture of shame and pride, each word weighing like lead in the stuffy garage air. She told him she had gotten the food from a kind employee at a simple deli tucked away in the back of the mall, far from the fancy stores and illuminated displays. She hadn't eaten something like that, something warm and delicious, in many weeks. But 3 older boys had seen her leaving the deli, clutching the bag as if it were gold, and she knew the cruel script that would follow all too well. That look from a distance meant only one thing. They were going to steal it. They were coming after her to take the food. So she ran. She ran barefoot on the hot asphalt that burned the soles of her feet, between cars that didn't see her, desperately trying to save the little she had managed to get. She needed to hide it fast, very fast, before they caught her. And in her desperation, she chose the one place she believed her attackers wouldn't dare to look, wouldn't have the nerve to touch. Under the imposing black car of the man in the suit she saw passing by at the same time every day, always in a hurry, always alone, always with that stern look of someone who has no time for the world. Her strategy had worked perfectly. She had tricked the boys. They searched everywhere, cursed, threatened, but found nothing, and eventually gave up and left. She had stayed hidden behind a pillar, waiting, relieved, her heart still pounding in her small chest, until she saw Daniel approaching his car, keys in hand, ready to leave. And then panic seized her again. If he got in the car and drove off without knowing something was under the wheel, the bag would be completely crushed by the vehicle's weight. The food would be destroyed. And with it the small, fragile chance she had for a slightly less empty, slightly less painful afternoon. That was exactly why she had run after him in such a desperate way. Not to ask for money, not to get anything more, not to bother him or cause trouble, but simply to stop him from accidentally destroying something she had fought so hard to protect. The logic was simple, direct, pure. But the act itself was absolutely monumental. Daniel stood there, holding the paper bag, feeling the weight of something that seemed so light but carried an entire universe of meaning. He held the bag out to the girl, his voice coming out, hoarser than he intended as he told her she deserved to eat it, that it was hers. But the girl took an instinctive step back, shrinking her thin body as if the offer was too impossible for someone like her to accept without fear of consequences. And then came the emotional blow that would change everything, the sentence Daniel would never forget for the rest of his life. She said, with a sincerity that was both cruel and sweet, that he could have the turnover if he wanted. Daniel thought he had heard wrong. He blinked, confused, expecting her to correct herself. But the girl insisted, explaining with a heart-wrenching calm. She said she had managed to eat early that morning at a place that gave donations to people living on the street, and that turnover was just for the afternoon, so it wasn't that urgent. She could wait a little longer for another opportunity. She said it as if hunger were a normal thing to be managed, to be negotiated with one's own body. And then she completed her explanation, looking directly into his eyes with a kind of profound perception that most busy, distracted adults had lost long ago. She said she saw him pass by every day with that look of heavy exhaustion, always rushing as if fleeing from something invisible, always tense and alone in his expensive suit. And she had concluded, with the strange wisdom that children forgotten by the world sometimes develop, that he looked much hungrier than she was, not for food necessarily, but for something that no meal could satisfy. In that precise instant, Daniel's entire reality split in two, because here was a child with no shoes on her feet, no home to go to, no security in the world, sincerely offering the little she had managed to save to a man who had an absolute surplus of everything. Not just an abundance of food, but everything. Money, a house, cars, clothes, opportunities, choices, a future. And Daniel, accustomed his whole life to winning tough negotiations, closing multi-million-dollar deals, and controlling people and situations, felt something he had no idea how to manage or process. Deep shame, Unexpected gratitude, sharp pain, raw humanity. He couldn't accept it alone. That would be too cruel. So he proposed they split the turnover, half for each of them, an equal share. And the two of them ate right there, standing in the middle of that crowded, noisy parking garage, surrounded by hundreds of people rushing back and forth, encircled by a world that had absolutely everything and yet couldn't see anything that truly mattered. The food was already cold, simple, ordinary, the kind of snack Daniel wouldn't normally even glance at. But to him, it was without a doubt the best thing he had tasted in a very long time, maybe years, because it came with a flavor that no amount of money in the world could buy. The bittersweet taste of being violently reminded that there is a real life, a true life constantly happening outside of one's own armored, comfortable bubble. Daniel left late for the most important meeting of the quarter. But for the first time in many years, he simply didn't care. He drove to the office on autopilot, arrived 23 minutes late, offered a quick, mechanical apology, sat down in his leather chair, and listened to numbers and projections and charts, but he couldn't manage to pay real attention to any of it. His mind was completely elsewhere, stuck on that impossible scene in the parking garage. The meeting ended without him really noticing. The investors left satisfied. Someone said it was a success. Daniel just nodded. That night, when he finally arrived at his luxurious, silent apartment in Midtown, everything felt different in a way he couldn't explain. The enormous space seemed even larger, emptier, colder despite the perfect air conditioning. The refrigerator was full of sophisticated, expensive foods he barely touched, imported drinks in the climate-controlled wine cellar, the leftovers from a lunch that cost more than many people earn in a week. All of it lost its meaning in the face of the vivid memory of a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, saying with terrible naturalness that she could wait to eat. Daniel couldn't sleep well that night, not because he was worried about business, proposals, or contracts, but because, suddenly and without warning, he realized with painful clarity that he had completely forgotten how to truly feel. The next day, Daniel did something he absolutely never did. He woke up, showered, put on simpler clothes, and before heading to the office, he went into a neighborhood bakery. One of those old-fashioned places with a glass counter and warm service. He ordered several freshly made turnovers, fresh squeezed orange juice, slices of simple cake and packages of cookies. The woman at the register asked if it was for a party. He answered without much thought that it was for a friend. He paid, took everything carefully packed, and drove to the mall. He arrived at the same time as always, parked in the same spot, but this time his phone stayed in his pocket, silent. Daniel scanned the area between the cars, and he found her. The girl was sitting on a concrete curb near the garage entrance, drawing something on the cement floor with a thin stick she must have found somewhere, completely absorbed in the small imaginary world that fit entirely within that crooked line. When she saw the familiar black car approaching slowly, she jumped to her feet, quick as a startled bird, and waved with both thin hands, full of a pure, transparent joy. It was the genuine joy of someone who isn't used to seeing promises from hurried adults kept. Daniel parked, turned off the engine, grabbed the large brown paper bag full of food, and got out of the car. The girl ran to him without a second thought, about keeping her distance or hiding her excitement. When Daniel held out the bag, she looked inside, and her whole face changed. Her eyes widened, her mouth fell open. For a second, she was completely paralyzed, processing that absurd amount of real, warm, fragrant food. It was too much, far more than she had ever imagined someone would bring. She looked at Daniel with a mixture of immense gratitude and sincere concern, and said in a small voice that she wouldn't be able to eat all of that by herself. It was really a lot. And then, without anyone having taught her, without anyone having asked, she responded with the natural gesture that was the deepest essence of her character. She said she was going to share it all with her grandma. Her grandma. Rose. It was in that moment that Daniel first discovered the girl wasn't completely alone in the world. She had someone. She lived with an elderly woman under an underpass in the Bronx, in a makeshift structure of old blue tarps tied with ropes, stacked cardboard for walls, and a few thin blankets trying to keep out the cold that seeped in from all sides. Her grandma was sick, her cough getting worse every day, and they only had one thin, tattered blanket to share on New York's cold nights. Daniel's stomach turned just imagining it. The girl explained all this matter-of-factly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, as if everyone lived like that. But then she made a point of adding, lowering her eyes to the ground in shame, that yes, they needed a lot of things, a whole lot, but they tried not to ask people for help, because most got angry, cursed at them, told them to get lost and treated them like trash, cluttering up the city's landscape. That sentence pierced Daniel like a sharp blade, cutting through living flesh. He promised right then and there, looking into her eyes, that he would at least bring a thick blanket to help her grandma get through the nights more comfortably. The girl smiled, but it was a small, tired smile, carrying at its edges a weariness far too old for someone so young. It was the smile of someone who had heard many beautiful promises turn to dust the next day. So Daniel made a point of crouching, down to her eye level, and said with all the seriousness in the world that when he promises something, he always keeps his word. Always. And he did. The next day was Thursday, and Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He stopped at a large department store as soon as it opened and bought thick, good-quality blankets, a full hygiene kit with soap, shampoo, toothpaste, and a toothbrush, new clothes in various sizes because he wasn't sure of the fit, coats for the cold that was still to come, and new shoes. And then, almost without realizing what he was doing, without thinking too much about it, he also put a few colorful children's books in his shopping cart. Simple, illustrated stories, the kind that capture a child's attention. When he reached the blue tarp, stretched under the underpass, with heavy bags in his hands and his heart beating faster than it should, Daniel finally saw Rose for the first time. She was a short woman, her extremely thin body covered in old, patched clothes, her hands calloused and swollen, betraying endless years of hard, thankless labor. Her face was marked by time and suffering, but her eyes were still alive, still alert, still wary, as the eyes of someone who fiercely protects the only true love left in their entire world must be. Rose didn't trust men in expensive suits. She had every reason in the world not to, and she was absolutely right not to. She placed herself in front of her granddaughter in an automatic protective gesture and questioned Daniel with a firm, raspy voice, her narrow eyes studying his every detail. Who was he? What did he want? Why was he bringing things? What did he expect in return? She tested his intentions with direct, harsh questions, not letting her guard down for a second until she heard from her own granddaughter, in that voice full of affection, that this was the kind man who had shared the turnover with her in the parking garage. The atmosphere softened a little with this information, but the tension still lingered in the air. This meeting was extremely delicate, as fragile as thin glass, and any foolish mistake, any wrong word, could become a permanent trauma for them both. Daniel handed over the bags slowly, respecting their space, calmly explaining what he had brought. Rose looked inside, touched the items carefully, as if she couldn't believe they were real, that they were truly for them. Her granddaughter, who Daniel learned that day was named Lily, saw the colorful books at the bottom of one of the bags and simply froze. She pulled out one of the books with trembling hands, looked at the illustrated cover, ran her dirty fingers over the glossy pages, and hugged the book to her thin chest, as if she were embracing the entire future she never imagined she could have. But the drama of life doesn't let the heart rest easy without a painful cut soon after. Suddenly, as if summoned by the worst possible timing in the universe, a man Daniel knew very well appeared, walking toward them. Mark, one of the partners at the firm, someone from the same world of money and contracts, with a leather briefcase in his hand, and the social discomfort of someone who just left a private gym plastered on his tanned face. He saw the whole scene, stopped in his tracks, and reacted with that specific kind of cold, cruel realism disguised as genuine care and a friend's concern. Mark approached and began to issue warnings in a low but firm voice. He spoke of danger, of lawsuits, of the possibility of blackmail, of how street people always find a way to cause trouble, of an endless line of requests, of a media scandal, of how this kind of behavior could tarnish the entire company's reputation and scare off serious investors. He warned with the air of someone who knows the world, that real charity is done the right way, through an established organization, with signed papers, at a safe distance without direct human contact that could complicate everything. Daniel felt his blood boil. And, for the first time in many years of working side by side with this man, he confronted his partner with a harsh voice. He said that they have names, that they are real people with a history and dignity, that they are no threat, that they aren't trying to get anything from anyone. He spoke loudly, not caring who might be listening. Mark raised his hands in a gesture of sarcastic surrender, said he was just trying to help, that he hoped Daniel knew what he was doing, and walked away, shaking his head with an air of superiority, leaving a poisonous trail of words floating in the heavy air. And the venom of those words hit the one person who least deserved it. Lily heard everything, every harsh word, every cruel insinuation, every warning disguised as concern. The smile that had been shining on her face just seconds before vanished completely, as if it had never existed. Her gaze fell, her shoulders slumped. She dropped the book she had been hugging and started apologizing in a voice so low it was barely audible, as if her poverty were a horrible crime she had accidentally committed, as if her mere existence was a problem for important people, as if she and her grandma were a burden no one deserved to carry. And that broke something inside Daniel in a way he didn't know was possible. He knelt on the dirty ground right there, getting to Lily's eye level, and gently held her small shoulders, affirming with all the conviction he could muster in his emotional voice that she was not dangerous at all. That she was, in fact, one of the bravest people he had ever met. That she was kind, generous, and noble in a way that most of the wealthy adults he knew would never be. That what that man said didn't matter at all, because that man didn't really know her, didn't know her story, didn't know anything. And then Daniel made a solemn vow that would completely change the course of everything. He promised he would keep coming there every day whenever he could, because he truly wanted to. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, not to feel good about himself, but out of a genuine choice. Because in 2 days she had already taught him things about humanity that he had completely forgotten existed. Rose, who had been watching everything in silence with that protective suspicion, let out a long, heavy sigh. She looked at Daniel with eyes full of tears she refused to let fall, and said just one thing: "Thank you." It was a simple phrase, but it carried the weight of decades of contempt, abandonment, and invisibility, finally being broken by a genuine human gesture. From that exact moment, a completely transformative routine was born for everyone involved. For the next 2 weeks, Daniel showed up at the underpass almost every day, sometimes early in the morning before work, sometimes in the late afternoon, always bringing something. Hot meals in containers, medicine for Rose's worsening cough, thick socks, new sneakers in the right size, warm jackets for the cold. But mostly, he brought time. Time to talk, time to listen, time to simply be present without rushing off. He slowly learned Rose's full story. She had worked her entire life as a housekeeper in family homes, waking up before sunrise and returning after sunset. She raised 3 children alone on money that barely covered the basics. She never had a formal employment contract, never had guaranteed rights, never had a well-deserved rest. When arthritis took over her hands and knees, when her body finally gave out after decades of relentless use, she was simply dismissed like an old object that was no longer useful. No notice, no severance, nothing. The family she had served for years threw her out onto the street as easily as they would toss a bag of trash in a dumpster. Daniel also discovered that Lily's mother, Rose's youngest daughter, had left the city almost a year ago, saying she was going to look for work upstate, that she would send money every month, that she would be back soon. She never showed up again, never called, never sent a dime. She simply vanished, leaving the girl with her sick grandmother under a leaky tarp. And he also discovered something that hit him hard. Lily had taught herself to read, using old newspapers people threw away, bus ads, product packaging, anything with letters on it. She pieced together words slowly, guessing at the sounds, assembling the alphabet in her head like an impossible puzzle. All because she had no books, no school, no one to teach her. The violent contrast with his own life exploded in Daniel's face when he thought of his own 10-year-old daughter, Julia. She had a decorated room, a new tablet, private English and piano lessons, a closet full of clothes she barely wore, and spent half her time complaining about insignificant details he could no longer listen to with patience. When was the last time he had really talked to her about something important? When was the last time he had asked how she was truly feeling? The answer hurt more than it should. If you were in Daniel's shoes right now, would you continue helping Lily and Rose, or would you do something different? Tell us in the comments. His decision matured slowly, growing inside his chest like a slow but strong plant, and finally burst forth on a Saturday morning. Daniel woke up before his alarm, had coffee while looking out the enormous window of his apartment, and the idea became perfectly clear, crisp, obvious. He knew exactly what he had to do. He knew it was risky. He knew some people would disagree. He knew it might complicate things. But for the first time in a long time, Daniel wasn't thinking about possible complications. He was thinking about doing what was right. That same Saturday morning, Daniel did something he would normally never do on a sacred weekend of rest. He went to his company's office. The commercial building was practically empty, silent, with that strange air that workspaces have when they aren't filled with people rushing around. He went up to the 10th floor, swiped his badge at the glass door, entered, and went straight to find Patricia, the head of human resources, who always worked on Saturdays, reviewing processes and documents that piled up during the week. Patricia looked up from her computer when she saw Daniel walk into her office, surprise visible on her face. What was the company owner doing here on a Saturday? Had something serious happened? He never showed up outside of business hours. Daniel sat in the chair across from her desk and got straight to the point. No beating around the bush, because he had already wasted too much of his life on unnecessary detours. He asked about the small room at the back of the floor, near the break room and the restrooms, the space that had always been used as a storage closet for cleaning supplies, old boxes and archived papers, one would ever look at again. Patricia confirmed the room existed, but was a complete mess filled with things that had accumulated for years. Daniel said he wanted to clear out that entire space, throw away everything that was no longer useful, and turn it into a real, functional room. He wanted to put in a good bed, a decent wardrobe, clean bedding, maybe a small table and a chair. He wanted it ready for someone to live there. Patricia frowned, completely confused by the strange request. Live there in the office? Who? Why? Daniel took a deep breath and explained everything from the beginning. He told her about the encounter in the parking garage, about Lily saving the turnover, about her sick grandmother living under the underpass, about the conversations he'd had with them, about everything he had discovered. And then he revealed the plan that had taken shape in his mind over those 2 intense weeks. He wanted to hire Rose as the company's cook, with a formal contract, a fair salary, and a full benefits package. And he wanted her to live in that back room until she could save enough money to rent a better place. With her granddaughter, of course. And on top of all that, he wanted to enroll Lily in a good public school just 2 blocks away so she could finally get a real education. Patricia was silent for a long time, processing it all. She was an experienced, competent professional who had handled 1,000 complicated situations in her career. But this was new. She naturally foresaw some obvious questions that would arise. The board might find it strange. Other employees might complain about favoritism. There could be extra bureaucracy to regularize a residence in a commercial space. There could be resistance. But she looked at Daniel and saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't empty holiday charity. It was a firm decision born from a real transformation. Patricia slowly closed her laptop and asked if Daniel was absolutely sure about this. He replied that he had never been more certain of anything in his life. He said he trusted Rose more than he trusted half the people who worked in that building every day. That she knew hard work better than anyone there. That she deserved the opportunity she never had. And that if anyone on the board or among the partners had a problem with it, they could come talk to him directly. Patricia smiled for the first time since the conversation began. She said she would arrange everything. She would take care of cleaning the room, getting the basic furniture, and handling the necessary hiring paperwork. She would make it work somehow, because after 20 years in people management, she recognized when something truly mattered. And this mattered. Early Monday morning, before the sun had fully risen, Daniel returned to the underpass. This time he brought 2 large containers of warm, homemade food, bought from a commercial kitchen that supplied restaurants. He also brought a manila envelope with some folded papers inside. His heart was beating faster than it did before crucial meetings with powerful investors, because the conversation he was about to have was more important than any multi-million-dollar deal he had ever closed. Rose and Lily were awake, sitting on a piece of cardboard, sharing a small piece of fruit someone must have donated. When they saw Daniel arrive, they both stood up. He greeted them with a genuine smile and handed them the food first. They opened the containers and the smell of fresh food filled the stuffy space under the overpass. But before they could start eating, Daniel asked if he could talk to them about something important. He sat on the dirty concrete floor beside them, not caring one bit about his expensive suit, and began to explain slowly, choosing each word with care. He said he had been thinking a lot over the past few days, that his company needed someone to cook real food for the whole team, because people had been eating nothing but junk from delivery services or processed snacks. And he truly believed that Rose would be perfect for the job if she was interested. The work would be Monday to Friday from 9 to 5, with all labor rights guaranteed, a formal contract, health insurance, paid time off, a 401k, a transit pass, everything by the book. And what's more, she would have a small room at the back of the office where she and her granddaughter could live until she could get back on her feet financially. He took the paper out of the envelope and showed her the printed contract. The words were all there in black and white, official, real, true. The entire world stopped spinning for Rose in that instant. She took the paper with uncontrollably shaking hands, her eyes scanning the lines without being able to focus properly, because tears were already blurring her vision. She read the part about the salary, the benefits, the formal contract. She read it again, thinking she had misunderstood. She read it a third time and finally broke down. The tears came with force, the way they do when you've held in suffering for too long and suddenly receive an unexpected hug. Because this wasn't just a job, it wasn't just money. At the end of the month, it wasn't just guaranteed food, it was dignity. It was a real open door. It was someone looking at her and saying officially, with a signature and a stamp, that she existed, that she mattered, that she was worth something in this cruel, unequal world. Lily, who still didn't fully understand everything, tugged on the dirty sleeve of Daniel's jacket, her eyes wide and shining, with a hope so intense it hurt to look at. She asked in a trembling voice, almost afraid of the answer, if this meant they were going to have a real room. A room with a ceiling, with walls, with a door that closes. If there would be a real bed where she could sleep without fear of rain or cold. If there would be a bathroom where she could take a shower whenever she wanted, without having to ask for a favor or wait for a public facility to open. Daniel confirmed each question with a nod, feeling his throat tighten with emotion. Yes to everything, all of that and more. And he added that he had already spoken with the principal of an excellent public school near Hull, the office, and there was a spot for Lily to start next week if she wanted. She would be able to study for real with teachers, new books, notebooks and colored pencils, with other kids her age. She could learn math, science, history, English, whatever she wanted. She could have a different future than the one that had seemed inevitable. Lily didn't say anything. She simply couldn't. She celebrated by jumping, spinning barefoot on the dirty ground, laughing and crying at the same time, hugging her grandmother with all the strength in her small body. And that simple moment was richer, more valuable, more real than any sophisticated celebration Daniel had ever attended in his entire successful life. Rose wiped her tears with the back of her calloused hand, took a deep breath to regain her composure, and looked at Daniel with profound seriousness. She asked why he was doing all this. What had she done to deserve it? What did he really want in return? Because nobody gives anything for free in this world, she had learned that the hard way over decades of hardship. There was always something behind it, always a hidden intention, always a price that would show up when you least expected it. Daniel understood her suspicion perfectly. He understood and respected it. He answered with complete honesty, without any embellishment. He said he wanted nothing in return except her work in the kitchen, that she owed him nothing. That, in fact, he was the one who was immensely indebted to them both, because Lily, without knowing it, without any intention, had taught him in a few minutes something he had completely forgotten over years of chasing empty success. She taught him that what really matters in life isn't how much money you accumulate in your bank account. It's what you do with the opportunities you have. It's how you use what you have to make a real difference in someone's life. It's remembering to look around and see real people, not as obstacles or problems, but as human beings worthy of respect and care. He also told her, his voice cracking, that he had a daughter almost the same age as Lily, that she has everything but complains about everything, that he's never truly present because he's always too busy with things that in the end don't matter that much, that he had been living on autopilot, running on an infinite treadmill, chasing more and more, never stopping to ask why. And that meeting them in the parking garage was like a slap in the face that woke him from a deep and dangerous sleep. It was a gift disguised as a chance encounter. Rose listened to everything in silence. When Daniel finished speaking, she extended her calloused, rough hand to him. Daniel shook it firmly, sealing a deal worth infinitely more than any contract signed on letterhead. It was an agreement of trust, of mutual respect, of shared humanity. They accepted the offer. They accepted the job, the room, the school, everything. And the story then takes a necessary leap forward in time. 3 months later, everything had changed in a way no one at the company could have imagined. The tech company's office was completely transformed, not in its modern decor or expensive furniture, but in the invisible soul of the place. Every day when the clock struck noon, an incredible smell of real homemade food filled the entire building, wafting up the stairs, through the doors and into the offices. Perfectly seasoned beans, fluffy rice, stewed chicken, fresh vegetables, warm cornbread fresh from the oven, pudding for dessert. The whole team gradually changed. People stopped eating in front of their computers. They started going down to the break room, sitting at the large table, eating together, and talking about things that weren't work. They laughed more, they complained less. They returned to their desks with a different energy, lighter, more human. Rose cooked as if she were healing old wounds. She arrived early, put on her clean apron, washed her hands carefully, and began to prepare each dish as if it were a powerful medicine. She seasoned with love, with patience, with techniques learned over decades of working in other people's kitchens, and the result was magical. People who had barely spoken to each other before started swapping recipes with her. People who were constantly stressed began to thank her for the food every day. The heavy atmosphere of pressure and competition slowly softened, replaced by something more like a real community. Lily went to school for the first time in her life at 7 years old. A new uniform, a backpack, sneakers that didn't hurt her feet, her hair tied back with a colorful ribbon. Her eyes shone with an intensity that moved anyone who saw her. For the first few days she was quiet, a little scared by all the new stimuli, so many people, so much organized noise. But soon she opened up. She discovered she loved math, that she could read better than many kids in her class because she had practiced so much on her own, that she had a knack for memorizing poems, that she loved to draw. Her teacher sent a note home saying that Lily was a dedicated, curious and polite student, an example to her classmates. After school, Lily went straight to the office and helped her grandmother in the kitchen. She peeled vegetables, washed dishes, dried pans, and learned new recipes, but mostly she talked. She told her about her day at school, what she learned, the new friends she made, the books the teacher read aloud. And Rose listened to it all with the smile of someone who can finally breathe peacefully after years of holding her breath. The little room at the back became a real home, small but cozy. It had a floral curtain on the window, books organized on a makeshift shelf, Lily's drawings taped to the wall, a plush rug on the floor, 2 beds with fresh-smelling sheets, and a wardrobe that held the clothes they never imagined they would own. It was simple, but it was theirs. And that made all the difference in the world. Daniel had also changed in ways he hadn't expected. The executive who lived his life rushing from meeting to meeting, always late, always irritated, his phone glued to his hand as if it were an extension of his body, now stopped to breathe. He started having lunch with his employees at the large table in the break room instead of locking himself in his office to eat something quick while answering emails. He would sit, serve himself the food Rose had prepared with such care, and just talk about sports, about family, about weekend plans, about the life that happens outside of spreadsheets and profit charts. And he discovered something surprising. Those 40 minutes sitting at the table, eating the same food as everyone else, listening to genuine laughter and simple stories, were worth infinitely more than any important meeting with powerful people. He also started coming home earlier, a few times a week. Not every day, because the job truly demanded his presence and responsibility, but at least 3 or 4 times he managed to leave the office before 7. And when he got to his apartment, instead of going straight to his computer or turning on the financial news, he would look for Julia, the 10-year-old daughter he barely knew despite living in the same house. He would ask how her day was, for real, and he would wait for a real answer. He listened to her talk about her classes, her friends, the small joys and sorrows that are part of a 10-year-old's life. And he discovered, surprised and ashamed at the same time, that his daughter was an incredible person. Funny, smart, sensitive, full of interesting opinions about the world. How had he not seen that before? How had he spent so much time living beside her without really knowing who she was? On a sunny Saturday, Daniel did something Julia couldn't even remember doing with her father before. He suggested they go out together, just the two of them. No phones, no rush, no specific destination. Julia was surprised at first, but excitedly agreed. They walked through their neighborhood, stopped at a park, bought popcorn from a street, a vendor, and sat on a wooden bench talking about everything and nothing. Daniel told his daughter about Lily and Rose, about how he met them, about the turnover hidden under the car, the whole story. Julia listened with wide eyes, and at the end, she asked if she could meet them. Daniel smiled and promised he would take her to the office one day soon, and he did. On a Thursday after school, Julia went with her father to the company. Lily was in the kitchen helping Rose prepare the afternoon snack. When the two girls saw each other for the first time, they were a bit shy, studying each other with that natural childhood curiosity. But it didn't take 5 minutes for them to be sitting on the floor of the small room, surrounded by books, talking non-stop, laughing, sharing stories, and discovering that despite coming from such different worlds, they had much more in common than any visible difference. Julia was amazed when Lily told her she had taught herself to read. Lily was amazed when Julia told her about her piano lessons. The two became instant friends, in that quick and genuine way only children can. From that day on, Julia constantly asked to go back to the office, not to play on the computer or her phone, but to see Lily, to help Rose in the kitchen, to be in that warm atmosphere of homemade food and simple conversations. And Daniel watched this with a heart full of gratitude, realizing that his daughter was learning lessons about empathy, generosity, and human value that no expensive school in the world could ever teach. The months passed, and the transformation spread to every corner. The company continued to grow, business was good, and profits kept rising. But now, there was something more than just numbers. There was real humanity circulating through the hallways. There was a genuine connection between people. There was care. Then came a special Friday, 4 months after that first encounter in the parking garage. Daniel was in his office working when he heard a knock on the door, Lily's timid, unmistakable knock. He told her to come in, and she appeared holding a small package wrapped in brown paper, with the delicate care of someone carrying something precious. Daniel's heart recognized that package before his mind could process the information. It was just like the first one, the one that changed everything. Lily approached the large desk and held out the package to Daniel with both hands. She was nervous, biting her lip, waiting for his reaction. Daniel took the package carefully, felt the warmth still radiating from it, and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a perfect homemade savory turnover, golden brown, freshly fried, fragrant, made with a delicate dough and a generous filling. He looked at Lily, not quite understanding. She explained in that soft voice that no longer carried the insecurity of before. She said her grandma had taught her how to make it, that they had practiced several times until it was just right, that she had kneaded the dough, shaped it, and fried it herself under Rose's careful supervision, and that this turnover was a special gift for him, an important gift. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He asked why she was giving it to him, since he knew she loved turnovers and could easily eat it herself. Lily smiled with that wise look children sometimes have when they understand profound things that adults take decades to grasp. She replied that it was so he would always remember. "Remember what?" Daniel asked, his voice cracking. And then came the sentence that sticks in your heart and never leaves, the sentence that sums it all up, that closes the circle, that delivers the perfect moral of the entire story. That sometimes the best things are hidden under the car. Daniel couldn't hold it in. The tears he had held back for so long that he had hidden behind the mask of a strong, controlled executive finally fell freely down his face. He stood up, walked around his desk, and hugged Lily with all the strength and affection a hug can carry. He hugged her, as if he were hugging his own salvation. He hugged her as if he were embracing a true new beginning, and he whispered in her ear a deep and sincere thank you. Thank you. Thank you for teaching me to stop. Thank you for teaching me to look. Thank you for reminding me that I'm human. Lily returned the hug, squeezing tightly, and in that moment they both understood perfectly, without needing to say another word, that their meeting was not a coincidence. It was a necessity. It was fate. It was life conspiring to bring two people who needed each other together at the exact moment they were both ready for transformation. Daniel kept that turnover in the break room fridge. He didn't eat it that day. He didn't eat it the next. He kept it for a whole week, looking at it every time he opened the door, using it as a physical, real reminder of everything that had changed, of everything he had almost lost by being too busy to pay attention. In the end, he shared that turnover with Julia on a Sunday afternoon, told the whole story again from the beginning, and saw in his daughter's eyes that she understood the lesson too, that material things come and go, but human gestures, true connections, moments of pure generosity, those remain etched in the soul forever. 2 months after that emotional gift, the company decided to do a small renovation of the building's entrance, and Daniel had an idea that everyone immediately supported. They installed a beautiful mural on the main wall near the reception, with a large, colorful photo of the three of them smiling together, Daniel in the middle, Rose on one side, Lily on the other. Beneath the photo, a short but powerful phrase was engraved in golden letters: "Simple gestures change everything." The photo was beautiful. Rose was wearing her kitchen apron, a wide, proud smile on her face. Lily was in her school uniform, holding a book, her eyes shining with that special light of someone who finally has a future. Daniel was in the middle, not in an expensive suit this time, just a simple shirt, and for the first time in many years, the smile on his face was genuine, true, and free. Everyone who enters the building sees that photo. Visitors ask about the story. New employees hear the full account on their first day. And the message spreads naturally without being forced. The story of a girl who saved a turnover and ended up saving a man from the empty life he was living without realizing it. The story of an executive who learned that true wealth isn't measured by a bank account, but by how many lives you touch in a positive way. The story of a grandmother who regained her stolen dignity and could finally raise her granddaughter with security and love. Daniel changed other habits too. He now drives through that same parking garage every day, but no longer in a blind rush. He looks around. He pays attention. He sees the invisible people who were always there, but whom he had never truly seen. The man selling candy at the traffic light, the woman asking for help on the corner with a baby in her arms, the boy offering to wash his car. He can't help everyone. That would be impossible and naive to think. But he helps when he can. A kind word, a bought lunch, a referral to organizations he now knows and financially supports. And most importantly, he treats every person with basic dignity, with human respect, with the recognition that there is a real life there with a story and pain and dreams. He finally learned, after 43 years of living on autopilot, that stopping to look isn't wasting time, it's gaining life. that shared wealth multiplies instead of diminishes, that sometimes the greatest lesson comes wrapped in the simplest package, and that he thought he was saving Lily and Rose from that hard life under the underpass. But in the end, in all honesty, it was they who saved him from a much emptier and more dangerous life. The life of having everything and feeling nothing. The life of running so fast you forget where you're going. The life of winning on paper but losing in essence. The question Daniel now carries in his heart, and that he silently asks himself every morning when he wakes up, is simple but powerful. When was the last time you truly stopped to look closely? How many people have you rushed past, ignored without noticing, treated as invisible just because you were too busy, too worried, too distracted by your own problems that, in the end, might not be so urgent after all? Because sometimes, and Daniel knows this now with absolute certainty, the thing that has the power to completely change someone's life forever, the thing that can awaken a person from the dangerous slumber of an automatic routine, the thing that can teach the most important lessons about humanity, generosity, gratitude, and true love, is hidden in unlikely places, just waiting for someone to have the courage and sensitivity to stop for a moment, bend down, and look with care and attention. It's hidden in small gestures, in forgotten people, in encounters that seem like chance, but are providence. It's hidden under a black car in an ordinary parking garage on any given Tuesday, disguised as a savory turnover, safeguarded by a brave girl who taught that to share is to multiply, that to protect the little you have is to be truly rich, and that the greatest wealth in the entire world isn't locked away in vaults, but lives freely in the generous hearts that choose to see, choose to care, and choose to love, even when it would be much easier and more convenient to just walk on by and pretend you saw nothing. Dear listeners, we sincerely hope that the story of Daniel, Rose, and Lily has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of transformation, please click the like button right now, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new stories, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most, which part made you reflect on your own life. Have you also been letting important people and opportunities pass you by because you're too busy? Every day we bring intense and true stories like this one, which reveal the deepest and most beautiful side of the human soul, reminding us of what truly matters in this fast and short life. We look forward to seeing you with much love in the next episode. Until then, and may you never forget to look under the car.